Vampires, so you've returned to V Rising for the 1.0 update, and now you're faced with a new ultimate evil. It's you against darkness in an all-out fight to find out who's the best vampire, and we are here to help. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're revealing everything you need to know about fighting Dracula in V Rising. First things first, for those that don't know, Dracula is the last V-Blood boss in V Rising. He was added as part of the 1.0 update, and players will eventually need to defeat him if they want to claim the fourth and final soul shard, as well as unlock access to the Dracula armor chest piece recipes. You can find Dracula on the far east side of the map in the ruins of Morsham Zone. To enter his castle, you'll first need to craft the Blood Key. This recipe is only unlocked once you defeat Lord Styx, the Knight Champion, at his new location, Dracula's Demise, at the center of the map. Once you do that and craft the Blood Key, you can head back to Dracula's castle, pass through the outer doors, and make your way to this strange portal. Before you head in, however, I should warn you, this is an incredibly hard fight, even with maxed out gear, so you'll want to take every precaution going into the fight. That means you'll need the following: a 100% blood type of your choosing, we like Scholar. You'll want to bring multiple of these potions, as you may find yourself needing them as a result of one of the boss's major attacks. A potion of Rage, a Witch Potion, and a Vampiric Brew, a new consumable that increases spell leech and blood type efficiency. This is unlocked by defeating the V-Blood General Cassius the Betrayer. You'll also want to arm yourself with at least 10 to 20 Blood Rose potions, as they're the most effective way to heal outside of your various spells. It sounds like a lot, but trust me when I say this level of preparation is required to defeat the boss. You might have a sound game plan going into the fight, but over the course of the 2 hours that we spent progressing, Livid and I were constantly changing up our weapons and spells to try and best counter everything Dracula was throwing at us. One thing we realized was absolutely essential was a way to heal and cleanse ourselves throughout the fight. We both chose to run with Blood Fountain, which we used to heal ourselves, but we also made sure we equipped a gem that had a cleansing effect, removing any negative debuffs along the way. More on that shortly. Livid also chose to run with Phantom Aegis, a second defensive spell which provided more protection, cleanse, and a speed boost to either himself or me with the right spell gem roll. I personally chose to run with Void, a ranged offensive ability that allowed me to chip away at the boss or any of the encounter's summoned enemies from relative safety. Like I said, you're going to want to be flexible, but we feel having some sort of self-heal and cleanse is absolutely essential. Alright, let's jump into the fight proper because there's a lot of abilities to discuss and strategies to talk about. When you enter the portal, you'll jump down into a new arena, walking forward to engage the boss. It's a great idea to learn the timing of his activation so you can try and get off a few cheap hits, because once the fight starts you have very little room for error. One of the hallmarks of Dracula is his ability to move quickly around the encounter area. He very rarely stays still, teleporting from one player to another, and this gives you tiny windows of opportunity to deal damage. We found that, for the most part, the player that has aggro on Dracula will want to keep him at a distance because his melee attacks will put too much pressure on you to use your dodge, which will then limit you when other major boss abilities are cast. During the entire fight, you'll also have to be aware of Vampiric Curse, which you'll receive after being hit by a majority of the boss's attacks. When the curse is applied, you'll see a new debuff bar over your head. When it expires, you'll explode, taking massive damage. That's why we think it's so valuable to run with Blood Fountain and Phantom Aegis with the proper gems, because you can use both those abilities to completely remove the curse, making it a non-factor. If you decide not to run a purge, you will need to time your dodge perfectly right when the debuff expires to avoid the damage. Now, in terms of Dracula himself, well, he has a few core melee abilities in Phase 1. The first is a dash and then slash combination. He often does this right out of the gate, but it can really happen at any time during Phase 1. The tricky thing here is he can dash at one target and then retarget to another player for the slash, so it's best to stay far enough away from any allies so this doesn't catch you by surprise. The boss can also reposition slightly in a given direction and then stab forward with his sword. For the most part, this can be sidestep, but does come out of nowhere, making it a bit unpredictable if you have bad positioning. Dracula will also teleport and cast 2 vertical waves of energy towards a given player. These deal a significant amount of damage but can be entirely blocked by the columns, which is why, for the most part, we fight around these whenever possible. Similarly, the boss raises his sword and slams it into the ground, dealing AoE damage to anyone caught in the blast, but also, after impact, it shoots out 6 waves of blood magic in a star pattern that has to be avoided. Easily the most frustrating move in all of Phase 1 is the dual boomerang blades. These are cast regularly and shoot out in front of the boss and then rotate around their destination for a few seconds. They can arc around pillars, which makes them incredibly deadly, and on multiple occasions we took a few blades to the face, which ultimately ended in a wipe. If the boss casts these and then dashes to another location, they will find new paths back to the boss, so be aware of that. Again, you can use the pillars here to block the blades entirely if your positioning is sound. Another core ability of Phase 1 happens when Dracula transforms into a wolf, summoning 2 smaller wolves in the process. Most of the time, the boss will aggro onto one player and the smaller wolves on the other. It's recommended that you kill the small wolves as soon as possible, as Dracula can continue to summon more into the fight. There is no ceiling. The boss himself will leap towards and over a player, transforming back into a vampire and then slashing back in their direction. This is easy enough to dodge by simply moving in the direction of where the boss jumped from right as he's transforming, taking you out of range of the following melee attack. Dracula also has the ability to channel a deadly bloodstorm effect during Phase 1. During this time, blood orbs will shoot out in a rotating spiral from his body, while a ring of blood will close in towards the boss. If you get hit by that outer rim, you'll be stunned and dragged towards the boss, taking full damage from the attack. Your options are to dodge through the line or wait until the ring collapses and disappears, but you only have a short window of time to dodge away from the boss before the culmination of the attack. After the attack is finished is also a great time to land some damage of your own on Dracula. Throughout this phase, the boss will also call in waves of exploding bats. These will initially lock onto your player's position and then shoot out in a straight line. It's best to sidestep back and forth, never moving consistently in one direction for too long, as the jerky nature of your movement gives you a better chance to avoid all of the bats. It should also be noted, killing these bats will drop a small blood orb that, when picked up, will replenish a small amount of your blood. Randomly throughout Phase 1, the boss can also disappear, putting a darkness effect around the edges of your screen and summoning even more bats. It's critical to save your dodge in this phase because at the very end, Dracula will reappear and will try and grab every player in the arena. If you're caught, he'll drain your blood, taking a healthy chunk of your blood reserves away, which, if completely exhausted, could absolutely derail your fight. At around 60% health, Dracula will transition into Phase 2. He'll rise in the center of the room, and after an explosion shattering the 4 pillars, he'll re-engage you. Just to note, you don't have to hide behind a pillar here, it doesn't change anything, and the explosion doesn't damage you. Alright, so let's talk about Phase 2. It's more chaotic than before, with a slew of new abilities that you'll need to adjust for. One of the core mechanics, Dracula will summon a massive blood crystal that will slowly rotate around the room. You'll have to dash through the outer barrier to avoid taking damage and being slowed, but once inside, be warned that the crystal will shoot out blood orbs in a cone. Avoid the orbs and any stray Dracula attacks, and kill these as fast as possible because the boss can summon multiples and they will quickly eat away at your usable space during this phase. Dracula will also continue to disappear and summon a wave of exploding bats, something that functions exactly the same as it did in Phase 1. Most of the other abilities are completely new or revamped significantly to pose a bigger challenge. Instead of backstepping and then stabbing forward, the stab now has a wider AoE, which makes it even more difficult to dodge. Your best bet is to use your dash ability here, but you can walk out of it if you move perpendicular to the attack almost immediately. Dracula will also no longer just teleport and then attack, he'll now fly above the arena and then smash down, which is challenging to see. You'll have to watch out for the shadow on the floor to best see and adjust for the incoming ability. Instead of those dual boomerang axes, Dracula now summons a wall of blood orbs. These cover about a third of the map depending on your position, and your best bet here is to move backwards and find a gap. I actually find these to be easier to avoid than the axes. Dracula will also use the same melee attack that spawns red vertical waves of energy, but this time he'll shoot out 4 instead of 2, making them even more challenging to dodge, and they alternate the direction in which they curve as they approach the player. Throughout the phase, Dracula will also continue to use his Sword Slam ability that shoots out 6 waves of blood magic in a star, but at the end of those waves, massive pools of blood will spawn for a short period, exploding after just a couple of seconds. Simply move out of these to avoid taking damage. The boss will also randomly call down a number of blood swords that pierce the ground in quick succession, slowing the player if they're caught in the attack. You have a fraction of a second to move before they catch you, so if Dracula uses this ability, run like your life depends on it. The most challenging ability during this phase occurs when Dracula teleports to the center of the room. After a brief delay, he begins firing out homing orbs towards all players within the room. At the same time, 4 lines of fire will cut the room into quarters, and you're essentially relegated to smaller arena spaces for the duration of the ability. There really is no rhyme or reason to the movement of the orbs, so your best bet is to move as far back as possible so you have enough time to try and avoid the attack. At the end of this ability is also another great time to score some damage on the boss. If you manage to internalize all of those abilities, you have got a shot at defeating Dracula. It is an epic fight, but it leaves very little room for error. If we didn't say it out loud, we also recommend that you do this fight in co-op. The only catch is there's so little downtime between moves that you won't be able to res your companion if they fall, unless there are more than 2 people in the fight. I'm sure some brave fool out there will be able to solo the boss, but as far as we see it, you're ideally going to want a buddy or 2 to watch your back. We hope you found this V-Rising 1.0 guide helpful. We'll have more videos coming your way, so if you like our content and you like V-Rising, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.